You live in a world where everyone has been trained to look outward before looking inward. That is why so many desire, but so few manifest. You observe your bank balance, people's behavior, the delay of circumstances, and believe that all of this is telling you who you are and what you can have. But I tell you with the authority of the law, nothing outside of you has this power. Nothing. The visible world is merely an echo, a delayed photograph of the inner state you unconsciously assumed. And as long as you keep trying to change the echo without changing the source, you will remain trapped in the same cycle of frustration, doubt, and endless waiting. You still don't manifest because you ignore the only alignment that truly creates, the alignment between the state you claim to desire and the state you actually inhabit when you are alone with your thoughts. Most people ask for prosperity, but assume the identity of someone who fears loss. They ask for love, but dwell in loneliness as if it were their permanent home. They ask for healing, but see themselves as frail, waiting for a miracle to come from outside. You want external change, but keep the same internal version alive. And that is the blind spot no one teaches. Nothing changes until you change the inner place from which you are living. The law never fails, but most fail to understand it. You manifest not by what you say, but by the state to which you repeatedly return, even unwillingly. Reality doesn't respond to your anxious words, but to your silent convictions. That is why so many pray with desperation and receive even more desperation. They meditate with fear and reap more reasons to fear. They ask for signs and receive silence. Not because they are unworthy, but because they are misaligned with the end they desire. The universe doesn't deliver what you want. It delivers what you are at the deepest level. The alignment no one teaches is this. You must live internally as one who already possesses what you desire before any evidence appears. Scripture never said when you see, believe. It says believe first. Imagination is the womb of reality, but you have been using it as a mirror of the past, not as a portal to the future already completed. As long as your imagination reflects fear, lack, doubt, or waiting, the world will do nothing but obey. And it is precisely here that your life begins to change. When you realize that the world is not delayed, you are fragmented. Your desire points in one direction, but your feeling lives in another. Your words say, I want, but your state says, I don't have. And it is this internal conflict, unperceived and unresolved, that hinders the natural flow of manifestation. When you finally understand this, everything changes, because from that point on, you stop trying to convince the world and start convincing yourself. This is where creation happens. This is where the impossible becomes inevitable. Have you ever noticed that deep down, you don't live by what you desire, but by what you consider true about yourself? This is the first principle, the most neglected and the most decisive. You don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you accept as real in the silence of your own consciousness. It's simple, yet unsettling, because it forces you to look inward with honesty. No matter how many affirmations you repeat, how many techniques you perform, how many videos you watch, if the inner state you assume is still one of waiting, doubting, or fearing, then it is that state that reality hastens to confirm. Life never responds to your desire itself. It responds to the meaning you attach to it. You might desire prosperity, but if, upon seeing a low bank account, you immediately shrink back, assume defeat, or accept the idea that it's not possible yet, the state that truly vibrates within you is not one of abundance but of lack. You might desire love, but if, when you are alone, you see yourself as ignored or unworthy, then that is the inner reflection life returns to you. Everything that comes to you is merely a mirror of what you have decided, consciously or unconsciously, is true. And what's most striking is that this principle operates constantly, even when you're not observing it. It expresses itself in automatic reactions, quick interpretations, and the thoughts you repeat while walking, while showering, while waiting for something to happen. It is there, in these small internal responses, that your true state is revealed. You might even say, I believe, but if your chest tightens, if your mind imagines difficulties, if your body responds with tension, then you are still aligned with a reality you do not desire, and it is that reality that continues to repeat itself. Assuming the truth of your desire is not a struggle to believe, it is allowing yourself to emotionally inhabit the fulfilled end. It is breathing as one who has already achieved. It is walking as one who already possesses. It is thinking as one who doesn't seek signs, because you know that the state has already decreed the result. It's not pretense, it's not theater, it's not forcing positivity. It's an inner rest, a silent and firm acceptance that what you have chosen is real even before the world can catch up. When you begin to treat your desire as something present and not as something distant, your entire being starts to respond differently. You abandon the anxious gaze at circumstances and adopt the posture of one who knows that the exterior is merely the last to change. And it is at this moment that reality begins to yield, because it has no choice. It always obeys the state you assume as true. And when your inner self stops living in not yet and starts living in already is, everything around you begins, inevitably, to reorganize to reflect this new truth. You need to understand that the outer world is a constant hypnotist. It tries all the time to convince you that it is the cause, that it rules, that it dictates what you should feel and believe. And this is where so many get lost. They observe circumstances as if they were definitive truths, when in reality they are merely delayed effects of old states. The second principle arises precisely from this collective blindness. As long as you allow yourself to be guided by the evidence of what you see, you will live as a servant of reality, not its creator. And those who live reactively never manifest, they merely repeat. Most people look at what exists and conclude, this is what I can have. They look at the delay and say it's taking too long, as if delay had a life of its own. They look at lack and say it's not possible, as if lack were a law. They look at silence and interpret rejection, as if silence were an answer. But all of this is an illusion created by the conditioned mind. Reality doesn't speak. Reality merely mirrors. It doesn't give messages. It reflects states. It is you who reads messages where there are none. It is you who gives power to what never had any. When you live asking for signs, you confess that you don't believe. When you live waiting for external movement, you declare that the internal work is not complete. And when you feed doubts because of the delay, you forget that time is merely the distance between the assumed state and your persistence in it. Time decides nothing. It merely obeys what you have chosen to live within yourself. The Creator doesn't observe the scenario to decide whether to believe. They believe and let the scenario catch up. Scripture says, "The just shall live by faith." And faith, according to the law, is not hope, it's not wishing, it's not anxiety. Faith is to assume the end so completely that no appearance has the power to move you. It is to look at contrary circumstances and know that they are merely shadows of an old state that is dissolving. It is to act as one who knows the secret. The exterior always arrives last. When you understand this, you abandon the slavery of seeing to believe and begin to live in the only place where creation truly exists, in sustained imagination. And something powerful happens when you abandon the evidence. Reality loses its power to manipulate you. You stop fluctuating, stop doubting, stop interpreting every event as a sign. Suddenly, you no longer react to the world reacts to you. You cease to be a leaf carried by the wind of circumstances and become the wind. Because one who assumes the state does not depend on what they see. They shape what they see. And it is only when you refuse to be guided by appearances that you finally begin to manifest what you truly chose. There is something few people realize. Every emotion you sustain, every sensation that repeats within you, is a seed sown in the invisible field of creation. Nothing sprouts in the external world that hasn't first been cultivated internally. That is why the third principle is decisive. You don't reap what you desire. You reap what you feel, what vibrates, what silently dwells within you when no one is looking. It's not enough to want abundance if your heart still pulses with lack. It's not enough to ask for love if your breath carries abandonment. It's not enough to visualize health if your body vibrates with fear. Life isn't unfair. It's precise. People imagine that their emotions are reactions to facts when, in reality, it is facts that react to their emotions. Fear doesn't appear because life became difficult. life becomes difficult because you vibrate fear. Scarcity doesn't arrive because the world is cruel. It arrives because you live internally as someone on the brink of loss. Have you ever noticed how some days seem to attract one problem after another? It's not bad luck. It's vibrational coherence. The mind assumes a state, the body confirms it, and reality merely organizes events around that pattern. And what's most profound is that this vibration isn't what you feel at the peak of your spiritual practice or during your prayer. It's what you feel when you're distracted, when you're tired, when you're on autopilot. Because it is in this neutral state that your true vibrational self emerges. That is where your most ingrained beliefs, your unexamined fears, your silent expectations are registered. And it is these impressions, not your conscious desires, that shape the results you repeatedly experience. Therefore, transforming emotion is transforming life. Not by force, but by consistency. The emotion aligned with the desired end is not forced euphoria, but a quiet familiarity with what you have chosen. It is the peace of already having. It is the naturalness of already being. When you feel the desire as fulfilled, the emotion accompanying that state becomes a magnet, a vibrational matrix that shapes everything around you. You don't need to worry about the how. The invisible field itself organizes paths, encounters, opportunities, coincidences, all based on the predominant emotion you sustain. And here is the crucial point. You don't need to control every thought, but you do need to monitor the prevailing feeling. Because feeling is the decree. It is the energetic signature that the world obeys. When you alter the feeling, you alter the path. When you alter the path, you alter the story. And from that point on, your life ceases to be a reflection of the past and becomes a reflection of the state you have decided to vibrate now. There comes a moment when what you desire needs to stop being an idea and become an identity. This is the fourth principle, and it is simple yet powerful. You must live as one who already knows, not as one who waits for signs, not as one who forces positive thinking, but as someone who naturally rests in the fulfilled end. The difference between imagining and assuming lies precisely in this. To imagine is to visit, to assume is to inhabit. As long as you merely visit the desire in sporadic thoughts, nothing changes. When you begin to inhabit it as your inner dwelling, everything starts to reorganize in your favor. To live as one who already knows is not to pretend something has happened. It is to feel that something already is. It is to walk with the posture of one who does not negotiate with appearances, because you recognize that they are merely temporary stages of manifestation. It is to look at absence and not call it lack. It is to look at delay and not call it slowness. It is to look at silence and not call it rejection. When your inner state stops reacting to the shadows of the old self, you finally become immune to what once made you doubt. And this does not mean acting like someone who already has what they desire in the physical world, but acting like someone who is internally what they wish to manifest. Real change begins in feeling, not in action. People think they need to act as if they were already rich, as if they were already healed, as if they were already loved. But acting externally without assuming internally is merely theater, and the universe does not respond to staged performances. It responds to the real state that vibrates behind them. When you live as one who already knows, the feeling of desire ceases to be an effort and becomes natural. You don't wake up seeking signs. You wake up knowing that everything is already in motion. You don't check the time, you check your state. You don't demand results, you rest in certainty. This certainty is silent, it needs no words or explanations. It is a trust so pure that it is undisturbed by anything, because it understands that the exterior always arrives last. One who knows does not wait. They merely observe the world align itself. And something magical happens when this posture stabilizes within you. Reality begins to treat you as what you have assumed yourself to be. People respond differently. Opportunities arise, paths open, situations resolve themselves. Not because something out there changed on its own, but because you changed the point from which your life is emitted. And when the source changes, everything changes. This is how the assumed state manifests. First as conviction, then as reflection. Always in that order. There is a moment when you realize that you don't need to push the world, convince the universe, or prove anything to anyone. This is the fifth principle. Persistence is not struggle. It is rest. To persist in truth has nothing to do with stubbornness, excessive mental effort, or repeating techniques until exhaustion. To persist is to return, every time, to the state you chose to inhabit. It is the gentle discipline of remaining in the end, even when the beginning still seems the same. It is to remember calmly and decisively that everything is already complete in the invisible, and that the visible merely follows its rhythm. Most people believe that persisting means fighting against doubt, but fighting against doubt is a way of feeding it. True persistence doesn't contend with anything. It simply refuses to abandon the chosen state. It observes doubt arise and does not make it real. It sees the old self trying to return, but does not invite it to stay. It's like keeping a small yet constant flame burning until it becomes the only light within you. Persistence is not an explosive force, it is a silent constancy. And it is in this constancy that manifestation becomes inevitable. Because when you persist in the desired end, you begin to dissolve the old emotional patterns and automatic reactions that once kept you trapped in the same cycle of results. With each return to the chosen state, you weaken the old identity and strengthen the new. There is no drama in this, there is maturity. You begin to understand that creation doesn't happen at the moment the desire arises, but at the moment you remain faithful to it, even when nothing external seems to change. This kind of persistence is rest because it demands no emotional effort. It requires no anxiety, no haste, no comparison. It is simply the deep decision to remain being what you have chosen to be. And curiously, the less you struggle, the faster things change. The less you try to control the exterior, the more the exterior aligns. The less you seek signs, the more signs appear. Not because you force them, but because you are in coherence with the reality that already exists within you. To persist is to remain. To remain is to believe. And to believe, according to the law, is not to wait to see. It is to live as if it already is. When this understanding settles in, you finally experience liberation. The burden vanishes, anxiety dissipates, urgency disappears. You rest in the desired state as one who rests in their own home, because you know that nothing and no one can take away what has already been assumed in the invisible. Manifestation, then, ceases to be an extraordinary event and becomes the natural movement of life obeying your state. Now you understand that nothing outside of you has the authority to decide the course of your life. Everything you have experienced so far was merely the reflection of the state you sustained, often without realizing it. And everything you wish to experience from now on already exists, not in the physical world, but in the only place where creation truly happens within you. The law never failed, or never. You, for an instant, simply forgot that you are not a beggar of the universe, but the very creative center of your experience. Stop negotiating with appearances. Stop interpreting delay as a sign of absence. Stop believing that the visible is stronger than the invisible. Everything you want is already formed in the dimension of sustained imagination. It is up to you to remain in the state, protect the state, rest in the state, because it is the state that commands reality, not the other way around. When you abandon the old self and assume without hesitation the fulfilled end, you become untouched by external movements. The world ceases to be an unpredictable enemy and becomes a faithful servant, fulfilling exactly what you have decreed in silence. Beg no more for change. Don't wait for circumstances to give you permission to believe. Don't put yourself in the position of one who needs to convince the universe. You don't ask, you affirm. You don't supplicate, you choose. You don't observe to believe, you believe to observe. From this moment on, live as one who knows that the decree has already been given, that the seed has already been planted, that the destiny is already complete. Inhabit the end as your definitive dwelling. And when doubt tries to return, remember what is true. You don't manifest when everything changes out there. You manifest when something changes in here. And if you sustain this change with firmness, with peace, and with conviction, the world simply will have no alternative. It will obey. Because reality has no will of its own. It merely follows the inner state of the one who has finally recognized themselves as the creator. Listen to me carefully, because there are truths that are not learned, only remembered. And what I'm about to tell you now is an ancient memory, buried under layers of fear, haste, and disbelief. Before you worry about how, when, or why, remember this. You are the cause. There is no luck, no coincidence, no chance. Everything you call life is merely the projection of your consciousness, the result of the state you choose to inhabit, consciously or not. The world is the mirror of your innermost assumption. There are people who spend years studying spiritual laws, reciting affirmations, practicing techniques, and yet they live trapped in waiting. They wait for a sign, an opportunity, an external change. But what they don't realize is that the external world is just a delayed reflection. The secret is not in time, but in the mind that creates it. The reality you experience today is neither God as punishment nor destiny as reward. It is the echo of what you yourself have silently sustained. You can change cities, jobs, or relationships, but as long as your inner state remains the same, the scenery will only change color. The plot will stay the same. Because it's not the environment that transforms you. You are the one who shapes the environment from your feeling. That's why some seem to attract miracles, while others live cycles of frustration. The former understood that everything originates from the invisible. The latter still believes they need to see to believe. But I tell you, the true creator does the opposite. They feel before they see. They assume before they possess. They behave as if they already have it, and the universe, which is faithful to its vibration, hurries to confirm the decree. There is no magic in this. There is law. The same law that makes the seed sprout. Day follow night, the invisible become form. What differentiates the awakened from the unawakened is simple. The awakened understand that they lack nothing. They know that time is not an obstacle, but a tool. That 24 hours is not a limit, but a cycle of response. That what they feel now with conviction will be tomorrow's scene. The unawakened implore, the awakened declare. The unawakened wait, the awakened assume. So, if you want to manifest anything in 24 hours, don't try to force the world. Your struggle is not with circumstances, it is with the habit of forgetting who you are. Because the world does not bend to force but to faith, and faith, child of light, is not waiting for something to happen. It is knowing that it has already happened within you. Now be silent and feel, because what you sustain in consciousness at this moment, even if no one sees it, even if nothing changes, has already begun to materialize. And when you truly understand this, you will see that the power that moves the universe has always been in the same place. Within you. Nothing in the universe comes to you by chance. Everything that enters your life is the exact result of the state you inhabit, the reflection of what you chose to sustain in consciousness. The mind is the womb of creation, the invisible altar where the invisible becomes flesh. When you understand this, you realize there is no delay, no obstacle, no unjust fate. There is only one law. What you accept as true within you becomes inevitable outside of you. And that is why so many ask and few receive. Because most desire with words, but doubt with feeling. And creation does not respond to the request, it responds to the feeling. While you say, I want, you are affirming absence. And the universe, which is merely an obedient mirror, returns exactly that to you, the experience of wanting. But when you say, in silence and conviction, I am, the world bows to the new state. This is the key that separates conscious creators from frustrated dreamers. The former understands that there is nothing to ask for, there is only something to assume. The latter waits for a sign, and the sign never comes because they still vibrate as if they do not have it. It is not time that creates the distance between you and what you desire. It is your state. Because time is not linear, it is obedient. It bends to your consciousness. When you accept something as real, time begins to adjust, people move, opportunities arise, and the scene rearranges itself to reflect your new identity. It is like turning on a lamp in a dark room. The light doesn't fight the darkness, it simply appears, and the darkness vanishes. So too is the change of state. silent, instantaneous, and natural. But the ordinary person insists on fighting with the mirror. They see an undesirable reflection and try to change it from the outside, without realizing that the reflection is merely the result of the inner image. They change jobs, move cities, end relationships, seek new practices. But the pattern persists because the internal state has not changed. Everything changes except the creator within them. And that is why the same drama continues. When you understand that nothing comes to you, but everything comes from you, you begin to live on a different frequency. You no longer ask, you decree. You no longer wait, you assume. And every time you feel with conviction what you desire is already real, you are issuing an order to the universe. It has no choice but to obey, because it is your own extension. So instead of asking, when will it happen, ask, what state am I sustaining now? Because tomorrow is not by chance, it is merely today prolonged. Everything you are about to experience is already being created at this instant, within the temple of your own being. Everything begins with a silent decision, to assume the state of the end. Because while you wait for something to change, you are declaring, without realizing it, that you do not yet have it. And the universe, obedient, confirms exactly that to you, the absence. The human mind has become a slave to appearance. It believes it needs to see to feel, but the law demands the opposite, to feel to see. When you truly understand that everything is a state, you stop living reactively and begin to create consciously. There is nothing outside of you that determines your experience. There is only what you accept as true within. Every thought sustained with emotion is a seed planted in the field of reality. The harvest does not depend on effort, but on faith. You can struggle, insist, repeat the same desire 1,000 times, but if doubt still vibrates within you, you will be cultivating weeds with the same intensity with which you ask for flowers. The external world is not a judge, it is a mirror. It neither rewards nor punishes. It merely reflects what has been accepted as real. Therefore, when I say assume the state, I'm not asking you to merely imagine. I'm asking you to inhabit the feeling. Live in it as if it were already the air you breathe. Walk, talk, think, and react as one who already is what they desire to be. Because it is this invisible behavior that changes the structure of time. You do not attract what you want. You become what you believe yourself to be. And the world, being merely the shadow of your interior, cannot resist the new vibration. Those who understand this law discover the power of calm. They do not ask for signs because they know that the sign is the last thing to appear. The true sign is the feeling. The peace that comes when you stop waiting and begin to live as if the desire were already a fact. At that instant, the world begins to silently bow. People change, opportunities arise, and everything that seemed distant begins to draw near effortlessly. And that is how the invisible moves, not with haste, but with precision. The one who assumes the state does not fear delay, because they know that time is not a delay, but obedience. The universe needs only a mind that knows what it is. Therefore, abandon the role of the beggar and take the throne of the Creator. Every time you close your eyes and feel the scene of the fulfilled desire, you are writing destiny with your own hands. And when you open your eyes, you will see that the world has merely fulfilled the decree born within you. It is not enough to imagine something once and then return to the old state of doubt. The human mind has been trained to oscillate between faith and fear, between desire and distrust, between it's possible and it's difficult. But the law does not respond to doubt. It responds to certainty. Therefore, the discipline of imagination is what separates the conscious creator from the ordinary dreamer. Imagine, not as one who waits, but as one who decides. See the mental picture clearly and remain in it until the feeling becomes real. Do not ask the world to convince you. Convince yourself first, and the world will have no choice but to follow you. Most people live observing appearances and reacting to them as if they were permanent. But the awakened person knows that what they see is merely crystallized past, a delayed shadow of an old state. They do not argue with the reflection. They are not impressed by the form. They know that the invisible is more real than the visible, and that the only responsibility they have is to remain faithful to the new state, even when the old one still screams. This fidelity is the test, and few pass it. While the ordinary person asks for signs, The Creator creates them internally. They close their eyes and walk within the completed scene. They feel the touch, hear the words, breathe the air of fulfillment. They do not imagine from the outside. They enter, live, and lose themselves in the mental reality. This is how imagination transforms into conviction, and when conviction is total, the physical world becomes merely the natural consequence of the invisible. This is true prayer, not words but state. When you imagine with feeling, you are praying in spirit, and spirit is the only language that reality understands. You can deceive others with words, but you cannot deceive the field that surrounds you. It responds only to the vibration of your being. Therefore, if you wish to manifest in 24 hours, do not seek haste, seek intensity. Sustain the image until the body and mind obey the new internal climate. And when you emerge from this moment of imagination, do not look for signs. Your only task is to maintain the feeling of possession, even if the world says otherwise. Because every time you doubt, you return to the old state, and every time you persist, you solidify the new. The world, being obedient, can only reflect the most persistent state. Therefore, remain firm. Live as if what you desire were already an accomplished fact. Time is merely the servant of your belief, and it will not fail to prove you were right to remain faithful to the invisible. No desire can flourish in a heart consumed by fear. Fear is the veil that separates humanity from creative power. It does not destroy desire. It merely weakens, distorts, and transforms it into doubt. And every doubt is a disguised order for the universe to continue denying what you ask for. That is why many try to affirm the new state, but carry within themselves the vibration of the old. They want to manifest abundance, but still feel guilt. They want to manifest love, but still judge themselves unworthy. They want to manifest healing, but still believe in pain as part of who they are. As long as these contradictions exist, creative power will be divided. And a divided mind does not create, it merely oscillates. To purify feeling is to cleanse the temple where God resides. It is to silence the inner voices that say, I can't, I don't deserve, it's difficult. It is to replace every thought of resistance with a simple act of trust. Because creation does not demand effort, it demands surrender. The river does not fight to flow, it merely follows its natural course. So too is the flow of manifestation. When you release fear, power circulates again. When you forgive, the energy that was trapped in the past is released and begins to work in your favor again. Pure emotion is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. It is not thought that creates, it is sustained feeling. Thought merely directs. Feeling gives life. You can repeat an affirmation 1,000 times, but if it is not felt, it is merely sound. The universe does not hear words, it hears vibrations. And a vibration is born from what you truly accept as truth. Therefore, if you wish to change something, do not fight against what you feel. Transform the feeling through consciousness. Close your eyes and imagine that your desire has already been fulfilled. Feel the lightness of certainty, the peace of no longer needing to wait. This sensation is the sign of perfect connection. Remain in it, even if the world still shows the opposite, because at that instant, you are already creating in the invisible, and the invisible is always the first to respond. The mistake of many is to try to manifest while still carrying within themselves the memories of failure. They want the new, but continue to identify with the old. The awakened creator understands the past is not an obstacle, it is merely a story that can be rewritten, and they rewrite that story not with words but with feeling. They consciously choose to feel something different, and it is this choice that breaks the cycle. Thus, fear loses its power, guilt dissolves, and desire finally flourishes. Pure, complete, and inevitable, persistence is the supreme proof of faith, because it is easy to believe for an instant, but power only manifests when belief is maintained even in the face of silence. Most give up halfway, not because the law failed, but because they looked back at the old reflection and doubted. The reflection, however, is not a sign of error. It is merely the echo of the previous state, and the echo only ceases when the new sound is sustained without interruption. So is creation. The world bows to the most constant vibration, not the most intense. When you persist in the state of fulfillment, even without evidence, reality begins to adjust silently. The right people appear, paths align, doors open, and none of this is coincidence. It is the consequence of your inner persistence. Because faith is not emotion, it is posture. It is to remain firm even when the whole world seems to deny what you know to be true. The universe does not test your strength, it confirms your conviction. Every apparent delay is merely time asking you, do you still believe? And the Creator responds with silence, the silence of one who already knows what they are. You do not need to force the new to happen. You only need to refuse the old. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding the past. What is not fed, dies. And what is sustained, flourishes. This is how the invisible works, not through haste, but through constancy. Therefore, persist. Even when everything around seems the same, persist. Even when the mind tries to doubt, return to the feeling of the fulfilled end and persist. The person who masters the art of persistence becomes invincible, because the world cannot resist one who does not give up the state they have assumed. They walk as one who has already won, speak as one who already possesses, act as one who already is, and without realizing it, time bows before them, obeying the vibration they have sustained. Persist, and the universe will move for you, because what is real within you becomes law outside of you. Time cannot deny what consciousness has decreed with faith. There is no obstacle, no delay, no chance. There is only the reflection of what has remained firm within you. When the world seems motionless, that is when it moves the most. When nothing seems to change, that is when everything is adjusting. So, quiet the fear, silence the haste, and sustain the end. Live within it until it becomes your home. And when you realize it, the miracle will already be before you, not as something that arrived, but as something that always was, and that time merely revealed, because you had the courage to persist. Now understand, life owes you nothing. It merely returns to you what you sustain within. No miracle comes from outside. Everything is born in the silence of consciousness. The ordinary person lives as a beggar, waiting for the world to favor them. The awakened Creator, on the contrary, gives orders in silence and sees the world obey. Because they understood that faith is not supplication, it is command. That true prayer is not asking, it is assuming. That change does not come from effort, but from certainty. Everything you experience is the echo of what you were capable of feeling as real. When you understand this, doubt becomes useless and fear loses meaning. You no longer implore for change, you decree it. You no longer ask for signs, you create them. You no longer wait for time, you mold it. The difference between the unawakened and the awakened is only one. The former lives reacting, the latter lives commanding. One serves appearances, the other makes appearances serve their state. You were born to dominate, not to implore, to create, not to wait. Within you dwells the same power that ignites stars and moves seas. But this power only manifests when you stop doubting. The universe does not respond to your haste, it responds to your certainty. And certainty is silent, unshakable, firm as a rock. Therefore, from this moment on, no longer behave as a servant of circumstances. Assume the position of master of your own destiny. Close your eyes and feel the end fulfilled. Feel the peace of one who has already received, the gratitude of one who already possesses. And then walk in the world with this conviction as your invisible crown. Do not ask the world to change for you to believe. Change yourself first. Do not seek proof. Be the proof yourself. And when you do, you will see the impossible bow before you. Because the world is merely the stage, and you are the actor, the author, and the creator of every scene. Remember, child of light, everything you seek is already within. Nothing is missing from you, nothing is denied to you. The power is yours and always has been. Use it with consciousness, with love, and with authority. And the entire universe will silently bow to confirm your word. Man seeks doors to the invisible, but ignores that the greatest of all lies within himself. Since the beginning of time, sages have repeated in different languages and symbols the same truth. The kingdom of heaven is within you. And yet, most live as spiritual beggars, pleading for changes in the external world without ever realizing that the external world is merely a mirror of an internal state. The unconscious is this silent realm, the command center of existence, where every thought clothed in emotion becomes a creative command. Entering it is not a task for a select few enlightened individuals, but the natural right of every human being who awakens to their divine origin. You have been conditioned to believe that what is real is what can be touched, measured, or proven. But this is merely the shadow cast by something far greater. True power lies not in the hands, but in the mind. Not in physical effort, but in consciousness. Every image you hold within yourself is a living seed planted in the soil of the unconscious. And like every seed, it germinates in darkness before appearing in the light. The problem is that modern man fears inner silence, fears the void, and therefore distracts himself with 1,000 external voices, without realizing that by fleeing silence, he flees the very source of power. Entering your unconscious is turning inward until the world disappears. It is disengaging from the appearance of things and contemplating only what you desire as if it already exists. This is not an act of childish imagination, but an act of conscious creation. The unconscious does not distinguish between what is real and what is imagined. It reacts only to the vibration of sustained feeling. Therefore, what you feel as true, even if you deny it with words, will become fact. You can say, "I am rich," but if deep down you feel fear and scarcity, the unconscious will not hear your words. It will only hear the feeling of lack and reproduce it in the form of circumstances. The world is a collective hypnosis, and awakening means breaking free from it. It's not about fighting against appearances, but understanding that they have no life of their own. Everything that exists on the physical plane is a consequence, not a cause. The causes lie in states of consciousness. If you want to transform your life, don't start by changing the world. Change the state that generates it. The secret is not in doing, but in being. When you internally assume the desired state and feel it as real, the world obediently bows before your new self. This is the law, ancient as time itself. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And this is precisely what most have forgotten, that asking is feeling, that faith is not hope, but inner conviction, that true prayer is not a repetition of words, but the intimate acceptance that the desire has already been fulfilled. Therefore, in this teaching, I do not ask you to believe in something outside of yourself, but to recognize the power that already dwells within your own consciousness. Because when you discover how to enter your unconscious, you also discover that there is no distance between what you imagine and what you live. Everything you see out there is merely the echo of what you decided to feel as true within. The unconscious is the true silent creator of your reality. It does not think, argue, or choose between good and evil. It merely accepts absolutely everything that is felt as true. This is the first great revelation for anyone who wishes to transform their life. The unconscious does not respond to words, but to the emotions that sustain them. You can repeat "I am prosperous" 1,000 times, but if deep down you feel fear, lack, or doubt, the unconscious will register only the feeling and transform it into form. It is like a living mirror that reflects without judgment the emotional content you carry within. Everything you experience in the visible world is, in truth, the faithful reflection of what your consciousness felt as real in the invisible. Therefore, to understand this law is to understand yourself. The unconscious is like a perfect servant, obedient to the master that is feeling. It does not distinguish between what you desire and what you fear. To it, everything intensely felt is a command. If you fear losing something, the unconscious sees this fear as an instruction and creates circumstances that confirm that loss. If you feel rejected, the world around you begins to act in a way that validates this feeling. That is why transformation begins within, because it is impossible to alter effects while maintaining the same cause. The world is the mirror, and you are the image reflected in it. The secret is to feel the desire as already realized. Not as something distant, but as an inner presence so real that no doubt can survive. When you feel something with conviction, this emotion crosses the conscious mind and penetrates the deep layers of the unconscious, where all realities are formed. From that moment, invisible forces begin to move in your favor, arranging encounters, ideas, and events that will make the invisible become visible. You do not need to know how this will happen, because the how belongs to the creative power that acts through you. Your role is merely to feel with firmness and constancy what you desire as being now. Entering the unconscious is an art. It requires silence, imagination, and surrender. You cannot force it, only allow the correct emotion to permeate it. It is in a state of relaxation between sleep and wakefulness that access becomes purest, because at this point the conscious mind weakens and the language of feeling speaks directly to the creative power. Learn then to fall asleep feeling already in possession of what you seek. Feel the relief of one who has already succeeded, the gratitude of one who already lives the result. This emotion is the key that opens the doors to the invisible. The unconscious, true to its role, will transform this feeling into concrete reality. And when the world changes before your eyes, you will understand that nothing came from outside. Everything was the response from within. Because the unconscious always obeys, and what it accepts as true, sooner or later, becomes your life. Imagination is the portal through which the invisible becomes visible. Nothing that exists in the physical world emerged without first having been imagined. Before a house was built, someone envisioned it in thought. Before a melody was played, someone heard it within themselves. Man's error lies in imagining unconsciously, allowing fear, doubt, and despair to paint the picture of his reality. But when imagination is directed with intention and feeling, it becomes the most powerful instrument in the universe. What you imagine with emotion and conviction is what will inevitably become your experience. Most people imagine distractedly, believing that thinking about something is merely daydreaming, but there is a profound difference between fantasizing and consciously creating. To fantasize is to observe a possibility. To create is to live it internally. When you imagine something and feel yourself within the scene, when you touch, hear, and see as if it were real, you shift your consciousness to that state. And consciousness is the only reality. The unconscious does not know that this is just imagination. It accepts the internal experience as fact and begins to reorganize the external world to confirm what you have lived internally. Every manifestation begins with an image sustained in the mind and nourished by the corresponding feeling. The image is the form. The feeling is the life that animates it. That is why many affirm something but see no result, because the image they sustain and the feeling they emit are not in harmony. You can visualize wealth, but if you feel lack, you are creating more absence. You can imagine a perfect relationship, but if you feel loneliness, you are feeding the opposite. Imagination only fulfills its role when it is lived with total surrender, when mind and heart unite in the same vibration of certainty. Therefore, train your imagination as an artist trains their eye. Create within yourself what you wish to see outside. Make this a daily habit. Close your eyes and enter the desired scene until it feels natural, until the world around you seems like an extension of this inner vision. The key is not in force, but in gentleness. The more relaxed you are, the more deeply the image penetrates the unconscious. Effort blocks the flow. Faith releases it. When the image is clear and the feeling true, let go. Let the creative power act on its own. You don't need to push the river, just flow with it. Conscious imagination is the language of God within you, the means by which the invisible speaks to matter. And when you use it wisely, you realize there is no difference between imagining and creating. For imagining is the very act of creation in its purest form. Persistence is the fire that transforms the seed into fruit. Many understand the law, imagine what they desire, but fail because they give up before the creation is complete. The unconscious responds to constancy, not to haste. It needs a sustained vibration, a feeling repeated until it becomes natural. When you imagine something and then observe the world, looking for signs, doubting, analyzing if it is working, you leave the creative state and return to the old one. It's like planting a seed and every day digging up the soil to see if it has already sprouted. Thus, nothing flourishes. Persistence is faith in motion. It is remaining in the assumed state, even when everything seems to contradict it. It is saying internally, I already am, even in the face of absence. This steadfastness is not blind stubbornness, but the recognition that visible reality is always the delayed reflection of the invisible. When you feel something deeply and sustain that feeling day after day, without letting your senses waver, you are engraving a new program into the unconscious, and sooner or later, the world will bend to it. The conscious mind is unstable. It changes moods, beliefs, expectations. The unconscious, however, is the fixed, silent power that creates from what is repeated with emotion. Therefore, the secret lies in nurturing the new idea with patience and discipline until it replaces the old pattern. All true transformation first happens through invisible persistence before revealing itself in visible form. When the world shows you the opposite of what you desire, that will be the moment to prove your faith. The test never comes at the beginning. It comes when you are about to win. That's when the old state tries to pull you back, making it seem like nothing has changed. But if you remain steadfast, feeling the inner reality as fact, you will see the impossible dissolve. What many call a miracle is merely the result of unwavering persistence in an inner state. The best time to consolidate this power is when falling asleep. At that moment, between the conscious and the unconscious, the mind is malleable and receptive. Relive the desired scene as if it were already real every night, with serenity and certainty. Do not seek forced intensity, seek naturalness. Quiet repetition is more powerful than momentary euphoria. Over time, the feeling will become so familiar that it will cease to feel like an exercise. At that moment, you will know that the unconscious has accepted the new reality. And then, without warning, it will begin to manifest. Circumstances will change, people will appear, doors will open, and everything will seem like a coincidence, but it won't be. It will merely be the silent power of persistence, making the invisible become flesh before your eyes. The man who seeks to control the how is the one who has not yet understood the nature of the power that dwells within him. The how belongs to the domain of the rational mind, the small self that believes it needs to push the universe for something to happen. But the true creator acts in silence, confident that the invisible intelligence that shapes the cosmos is always moving in his favor. The unconscious is that intelligence, limitless, precise, perfect. It does not need your help, only your faith. When you try to discover how your desire will be realized, you interrupt the natural flow of creation. The act of controlling is, in truth, a disguised form of doubt. And where there is doubt, power fragments. To abandon the how is to abandon fear. It is to surrender to the certainty that the cause has already been established, and therefore, the effect is inevitable. When you plant a seed in the earth, you do not sit at the edge of the field demanding to see the process. You trust the life hidden beneath the soil. So it is with desire. Once felt as real, it has already begun to germinate in the depths of the unconscious. Anxiety in observing results is the gesture of one who doubts the seed, but the one who knows simply rests, not in inertia, but in trust. The conscious mind wants to plan paths, create strategies, predict reactions. The unconscious, however, is the invisible architect that moves circumstances, synchronizes events, and connects people in ways your reason could never imagine. It chooses the most natural and perfect means to realize what has been decreed within you. Sometimes this requires silence, other times a sudden inspiration makes you act at the right moment. But in both cases, it is the same power at work. To free yourself from the how is to live in active surrender. It is to continue imagining and feeling the desired outcome with gratitude, knowing that the path between the invisible and the visible does not belong to you. This surrender is not passivity. It is obedience to the law. Because when man tries to impose the how, he puts himself in the place of divine wisdom itself and ends up limiting what could be limitless. The one who trusts, on the contrary, lives in a state of calm, and calm is the signature of one who already knows they have won. The world transforms with perfection when man abandons the need to control. Everything that seemed impossible begins to align, because the creative power moves without resistance. It is like the tide that, silently and constantly, shapes stone over time. Thus the unconscious works, without haste, without error, without failure. The how is the burden of those who doubt. Surrender is the freedom of those who have already understood. When you leave the how to God within you, the impossible becomes inevitable. Living in conformity with the new state is the point at which creation becomes complete. Many understand the law, imagine the desire fulfilled, feel for an instant the vibration of achievement, but soon return to acting, thinking, and speaking as before. That is when the power dissipates. The unconscious needs coherence. It creates according to the predominant state, not a fleeting desire. Therefore, living in conformity is becoming the desire incarnate, to think like it, react like it, exist like it. The external world does not change first. It is you who changes. The world merely reflects the inner transformation. The man who understands this no longer observes appearances as the final reality. He may be surrounded by limitations and still maintain the feeling of fullness. He may be in the midst of scarcity and continue to feel prosperous, because he no longer lives by circumstances, but by the assumed state. The new state is the new name you give to yourself. And when this name is accepted by the unconscious, all of creation responds. I am is the formula of existence. Everything that follows these words becomes flesh. To live the new state, inner discipline is required. Every contrary thought is an invitation to return to the old. Every conversation of doubt is an attempt to erase the new image. Therefore, keep silent about what you are creating. Speak little, observe more. Words have power, but silent feelings shape destiny with even greater force. When you catch yourself reverting to the old pattern, lamenting, comparing, fearing, remember this is merely a shadow of what you were, not what you are. Choose again. Feel the new. Sustain it. The true creator needs to prove nothing. He simply lives in the state of the already realized. Faith makes it natural, and naturalness is the sign that the unconscious has accepted the command. When the new state becomes so familiar that it no longer seems like imagination, it is ready to emerge as fact. People around you will begin to react differently. Opportunities will arise unexpectedly, and the world obediently will confirm what you have sustained in silence. This is living in conformity, not waiting to see, but seeing because you decided to feel. Not seeking signs, but being the sign. The power is not in affirming, but in assuming. When you live from the new state, the universe recognizes the vibration of certainty and organizes everything to maintain the coherence of this new identity. That is why the world changes when you change, because it has no will of its own. It merely reflects what you have decided to be. And the day you live as if it already were, the entire world will have no choice but to prove that it is. Now you understand the mystery the ancients called creation. Everything you see is merely the shadow cast by what you carry within. The common man lives as a prisoner of appearances, reacting to the world he himself created, believing himself to be a victim of luck or fate. But the one who awakens to the law discovers that nothing happens by chance, that every event, every face, every detail of life is merely the exact reflection of the state he silently sustained. When you understand this, you stop fighting against effects and return to acting upon the cause. And the cause is always within. It is useless to beg for external changes, to plead for signs, or to try to convince the world. The power that moves mountains lies in the feeling you harbor now, at this instant. Everything that is assumed with faith and constancy in the invisible manifests, because the universe has no other choice but to obey the vibrational command of being. What we call a miracle is merely reality's perfect obedience to what has been decreed internally. Therefore, from today onwards, silence the noise of doubt. Do not worry about how or when or by whom. Abandon the despair of one who pleads and assume the serenity of one who already possesses. Live from the end. Speak as one who has already achieved. Walk as one who has already arrived. Feel as one who already is. With every breath, silently reaffirm, I am what I have decided to be. And the world, docile as clay in the potter's hands, will mold itself to the form of this conviction. From this moment on, no longer ask for signs. Command in silence. Feel the truth of your desire, as if it were an accomplished fact. And let the power of the unconscious do the rest. It does not fail, does not forget, does not get confused. It is the very expression of God within you, and everything you accept as true within you, the universe will confirm outside of you. Remember, everything already is, and it is within. The exterior is merely the echo of your belief. So choose now what you wish to hear back. Feel it, live it, make it real in your inner world, and observe the miracle happen effortlessly, because the miracle is nothing more than the natural manifestation of an inner state sustained with faith. This is the power, this is the law, and you are its creator.